I was the only one who made it out of that canyon alive. At least, that's what the report said. That's what command said. That's what the medics wrote. That's what the locals whispered when they carried us out of the smoke. But they were wrong. They all died. And they kept going anyway. We were Bravo 6. 8-man fire team. Deployed out near Shah Wali Kot, pushing through insurgent-held valleys to secure a suspected weapons stash buried deep in a ravine we weren't even supposed to be near. Intel was shaky. Comms were worse. The radios kept ghosting out before we even reached the foothills, fading to static, then to nothing. Then back again. But different. Distorted. Slower. Like the words were being dragged through water and stitched back together by something that didn't speak English natively. Still, we pressed on. Orders were orders. The IED went off at 0323 hours. We just breached the outer ridge. Sand. Rocks. Silence. No warning. No click. Just a flash and then weightlessness. I remember my body lifting. Not like flying. Like being separated from everything that kept me human. Like bones and skin and thought got filed into different folders mid-air and came crashing down out of order. I hit the dirt screaming. Or maybe I thought I screamed. My throat was full of dust. When I opened my eyes, I saw Parker, or what was left of him, still gripping his M4 like it mattered. Thompson was missing his helmet. Vargas was already gone, eyes open, staring at the ceiling of a world that didn't exist. And the radio? Still strapped to my back. Still hissing. But now, it spoke. Clear. Steady. 2 contacts moving east along ridge. Take high ground. Cover left. Vargas's voice. Dead Vargas. Giving orders like he was still drawing breath. Like he hadn't just bled out beside me. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then I heard it again, another voice. This time Parker. Copy that. Moving up. Left flank covered. And I saw it. His body, moving. Not the way a living man moves. No hesitation. No noise. No wasted motion. He lifted, stepped, crouched, aimed. Head still half open. Chest torn through. Didn't matter. He was fighting. So was Thompson. So was Cale. So was everyone who had died in that canyon. They didn't limp. Didn't scream. Didn't flinch. They just kept going. Covering sectors. Calling out positions. Executing formation drills like they were running an op that would never end. The radio cracked again. Stay low, Staff Sergeant. They're moving to pin. Route west is cleaner. West. The route I did end up taking. The only one that wasn't mine. The only one that led out of the kill zone. That call. It saved me. But it came from a man who no longer had lungs. They found me 2 days later. Curled in a ditch with half my gear burned and most of my left ear gone. Delirious. Dehydrated. Mumbling something about Parker's eyes still glowing red in the NVG wash. They said I imagined it all. That maybe some of them had twitched after dying, nerve response. Or maybe I'd watched other units pass through and confused the footage in my mind. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And now, I've got the recordings to prove it. Yes, recordings. Because my comms rig never shut off. And when I got my gear back from the QRF team that pulled me out, the radio still had logs. Dozens of entries. All time-stamped after the IED went off. Each one a full tactical readout from men who no longer had mouths. I started isolating the audio. Listening frame by frame. At first, I thought it was broken. The voices weren't quite right. Too clear. Too perfect. Like they'd been edited for broadcast. Stripped of fear. Streamlined for action. Then I noticed something worse. Repetition. Not just callouts. Whole sentences. Phrases being used again and again at different times, different angles. Contact left. 2 down. Push forward. I've got rear. You're clear, staff. We got you, brother. Or worse. To keep the mission going forever. I've kept it to myself until now. Didn't want to be discharged. Didn't want the meds. Didn't want the looks. But I've been getting messages again. Same channel. Same voices. But this time, they're not giving orders. They're asking. Pleading. Begging. We're still out here, staff. Why'd you leave us? We held the line. Why won't you? One more run, brother. Just one more. We can finish it this time. Don't let us be forgotten. You're one of us. Because silence. Silence is what kills soldiers for good. And I hear them still. Every night. Every static hiss. Every dream that starts with dust and ends in crossfire. They're there. Fighting. Watching. Waiting. And they're not done yet. Not until I come back. Not until we all do. They've started showing up in other missions. Not physically, not like they were in that canyon. But over comms. In the background. In the static. I'll be sweeping a compound in Hellman. Mid-stack, breaching. Full team around me. And in my headset, beneath the live chatter. I'll hear them. My dead squad. Move left, staff. You're too exposed. He's behind the blue door. Frag out. Watch your 6. And the worst part? They're always right. The live team doesn't hear it. The rookies shrug it off as signal bounce. The LT jokes that maybe I just can't let go. But then I get the kill. We clear the building. Nobody gets hit. Because they're still watching out for me. And I don't know how long I can keep pretending I don't hear them. Like they're still stuck in the canyon. And they want me back. I've stopped telling anyone about it. Not because I'm scared. Because I don't want it to stop. They're the best fire team I've ever had. Perfect comms. No fear. No sleep. No mistakes. And they saved me, again, just last week. Ambush. Compound raid. Bad intel. 4 tangos popped from the rooftop. We were boxed in. No cover. No exit. Then I hear. Back window, staff. Left corner. Go now. I move without thinking. Dive through glass. Hit the dirt hard. Pull 3 men out behind me. We survive. LT says I have a 6th sense. I say nothing. But I know the truth. I've got a 6th man. Still watching. Still calling shots. Still fighting. And one day, when the battery finally dies, when the trigger jams, when the last firefight comes and no one's left but me, I'll stop running. I'll sit still. I'll key the mic. And I'll whisper. Bravo 6, this is staff. Standing by. Then they'll answer. Copy that. Welcome back. And we'll keep fighting. Forever. Because some squads don't stop at death. They just wait for orders. I'm not sure what terrifies me more. That I'll die one day and join them. Or that I won't. That I'll keep living. Keep breathing. Keep dragging myself through wars that end on paper but never in the dirt. While they stay in that canyon forever. Fighting the same fight without me. And every time I key the mic. Every time I hear the static shift. Every time I recognize Vargas's calm drawl or Kale's sharp laugh breaking through the hiss. I wonder. Are they keeping me alive? Or am I already dead? Just another voice in the loop. Talking to a version of myself that hasn't realized it yet. And if that's true, whose orders am I really following? It's bleeding into daylight now. Used to be just the canyon, just the nights, just the moments between firefights when the air was thin and the static was thicker. But not anymore. Yesterday, mid-briefing, the LT was rattling off objectives and sectors when my radio, ***, turned off, no battery, ***, clicked alive. Not loud. Not enough for anyone else to hear. Just a small, sharp voice pressed against my eardrum like a secret. Staff, don't take the convoy. Don't ride second truck. Wait. Walk. I froze. Everyone else was nodding, jotting notes, sipping bad coffee. But my blood turned to ice. Because that's exactly what I'd been assigned. Second truck in the convoy. I lied. Said my headset was busted. Said I'd walk point with the scouts. They didn't argue. Didn't care. The convoy rolled out without me. 5 minutes later, second truck hit an IED. No survivors. The report called it bad luck. But I know better. It wasn't luck. It was them. After dark, I sat alone in my bunk, radio pieces spread across my lap. Battery gone. Antenna snapped. Circuit board cracked. Still, when I pressed the earpiece to my head, I heard it. Clear. Unbroken. The whole squad. Laughing. Not cruel. Not hollow. Just, like before. Jokes about chow. Complaints about boots. Teasing me about never sleeping, always staring, always writing things down. Like the canyon never happened. Like death never happened. Like we were all still alive. But then the tone shifted. The laughter quieted. One by one, they started calling my name. Not staff. Not sergeant. My name. The way they used to, when we were tired and sore and human. And then Vargas spoke. You don't have to be afraid anymore. You don't have to stay out there. You can come back in. We've been holding your spot. My throat locked. My hands shook. Because for a moment. For a dangerous, terrifying, beautiful moment. I wanted to. I wanted to key the mic, whisper back, copy that. On my way. I wanted to stop fighting, stop hiding, stop pretending to be alive when the truth is, I've felt dead ever since the canyon lit up the night sky. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked them one question. Where are you? Static. Breathing. Then Parker's voice, soft, almost kind. You know where. You've always known. The canyon never ends. You left your body there, staff. You're just walking the echo. And then silence. Not even static. Just silence. Now I can't tell anymore. When I eat, when I sleep, when I speak. Is it me? Or is it just the echo they left behind? Filling the space my body used to hold. And if it's the echo, does that mean I already went back? And the man writing this? The man hearing their voices now? Is he the one who never left? Or the one who finally came home? I caught myself saluting an empty chair this morning. Not joking. Not half asleep. Full salute, hand sharp, back straight, chest tight. The chair was in the corner of the tent, folded and used. But I swear, for half a second, Parker was sitting there. Helmet tilted back. Rifle leaning against his knee. That stupid smirk like he'd just beaten me at cards again. I blinked. Gone. Just steel and fabric. Just nothing. But my arm was still raised. And when I lowered it, my palm was damp. Like I'd touched sweat. Someone else's. They're getting closer. Not just in the radios, not just in dreams. Here. Now. Next to me. I'll turn a corner and see a shadow duck back, too fast, too silent. I'll hear boots pacing in sync with mine, half a beat behind, always half a beat. I'll smell cordite after rain, blood after dust. And I'll know, they're with me. Not haunting. Not warning. Just, walking. Command doesn't ask questions anymore. Not about the times I freeze mid-mission. Not about the times I mutter into dead mics. Not about the times I write names over and over in the margins of reports until the ink runs dry. They just nod. Stamp the papers. Look the other way. Because maybe they know. Maybe they've heard it too. Maybe every soldier who's lasted long enough carries a squad that isn't there anymore. The trick is pretending they don't. Last night was the worst. The base was dark, power cut, genies down. I was on watch, scanning a horizon that never changes. Then I heard it. The clap of a rifle stock settling into a shoulder. Right next to me. Too close. I didn't turn. Didn't breathe. Just kept my eyes on the desert. And then the voice. Relax, staff. We've got this sector. I almost dropped the scope. Because it wasn't Vargas. Wasn't Parker. Wasn't anyone from Bravo 6. It was me. My own voice. Flat. Calm. Certain. And when I finally looked, I saw myself. Standing 5 feet away. Rifle ready. Eyes forward. Not a reflection. Not a shadow. Me. And he didn't look back. He just kept scanning, like he'd been doing it for years. Like he'd always been there. I don't know how many versions of me are out there now. The one who writes. The one who fights. The one who salutes empty chairs. The one who still hears Bravo 6. The one who never left the canyon. The one who keeps guard at night, silent and unblinking. Maybe that's what they mean when they say my squad kept fighting after they died. Maybe it's not just them. Maybe it's all of us. Pieces. Fragments. Copies. Loops. None of us stop. None of us quit. Not even when the body does. Especially not then. And one day, when the final order comes. When the last frequency cuts through the static. When all the voices fall in line. We'll all answer at once. Every version. Every echo. Every soldier who refused to stop. And the war will begin again. This time, without end. I started testing the limits. If they're echoes, if they're recordings. Then maybe I could push them. Maybe I could make them slip. So I tried. One night, headset on, static warm in my ear. I whispered into the dark. Bravo 6, give me the password. Dead air. A pause. Then Vargas replied, exactly like I remembered from a dozen patrols. Same as always, staff. Don't you forget it. Except here's the thing. We never had a password. Not one. That's when I realized, they're not just replaying. They're building. Learning how to fill in the blanks. Shaping themselves around what I expect to hear. And each time I test them. Each time I challenge them. They get sharper. More human. More right. Like they're training alongside me. A week later, I asked again. This time I said. Bravo 6, what was the name of the kid I gave my last letter to? Parker answered, quick, no hesitation. Caleb. He was shaking, remember? Didn't even want to take it. You told him not to read it until after. My stomach dropped. Because he was right. Every detail. Perfect. But I'd never said that out loud. Not once. Not to anyone. The only place it existed was inside me. So how could Parker know? Unless Parker wasn't Parker anymore. Unless Bravo 6 wasn't Bravo 6. Unless the canyon didn't just hold their voices. It held mine, too. Now the whispers come before I ask. Little nudges. Hints. Warnings. Not in combat. Not in danger. In ordinary life. Cross the street here. Don't open that door yet. Leave 5 minutes later. And every time I listen, I avoid something. A wreck. A fight. A bullet. They're not just fighting battles now. They're fighting time. Stretching it. Shaping it. Moving me along lines that don't make sense. Except to them. And last night I heard something new. Not Vargas. Not Parker. Not Cale. Not even me. A voice I didn't recognize. Calm. Firm. Authoritative. Staff, hold your position. The others are still arriving. I froze. The others? I whispered. Static. Then, dozens of voices at once. Men. Women. Old. Young. Languages I don't know, accents I've never heard. All speaking together. We're not done. We'll never be done. Stay alive until we arrive. And then silence. Just static. Just me. But I can't shake it. If my squad kept fighting after they died. If I kept fighting after I died. Then how many more are out there? How many more voices stitched into the dirt? Waiting for their next mission? How many battles are still happening right now? In places no one remembers. Led by soldiers no one buried. And when all those voices finally arrive. When every loop, every echo, every forgotten name converges on the same frequency. Will we even know the difference? Between the war we're fighting now. And the one that never ended? Because sometimes I think. We've already lost track. Sometimes I think. We've been fighting that war all along. I woke up one morning and the sky was wrong. Not color, that was still the same flat blue you learned to hate, but how it sat in the world. Like someone had set a picture over the horizon and left a wrinkle in the corner. The light hit different. Shadows fell where they shouldn't. My watch said 0600 but the sun argued. I stepped outside the tent and there, leaning against the mess truck like he'd been waiting for me to notice, was Parker. Not a ghost with hollow sockets or a stuttering projection. Parker, full weight, cigarette shoved between knuckles, the scar on his lip I'd once told him made him look like a kid who'd lost a fight with life and won. He smiled the stupid grin that made me want to punch him and then apologize. About time, he said. You've been walking through all the wrong ghosts, staff. I laughed because you do that when your chest is full of rust and someone hands you oil. My laugh sounded wrong to my own ears. Too thin. You're not supposed to be here, I told him. He cocked his head. Neither are you. It was true on both counts. But the canyon doesn't do logistics. It does insistence. It does devotion. You can tell it no and it'll keep asking. You can walk away and it will keep calling. You can leave and it will hang your name on the ridge like a lantern, and every wind will know to point toward it. We walked. No plan. No orders. Just me and the outline of the men that used to be my life. The world moved around us. Trucks, radios, kids in distant villages, but everything in my bubble of perception was tuned to another station entirely. The static was a texture now, not a nuisance. The voices threaded through it like home songs. Sometimes a phrase would surface and be gone again before anyone else could hear. Parker talked. He always talked. He told me about dumb things, about losing a glove on the plane, about a girl back home who sent him a postcard with a coffee stain across her name. I remembered those things like you remember a song you haven't heard in 10 years, a half-remembered melody that hits a nerve when you hum it out loud. Listen, he said as we climbed a slope scorched orange by late afternoon. You ever think about how we trained for everything but coming back here? They teach you to clear rooms, to bandage ephemeral, to call the medevac. No one teaches you how to come back, if come back even exists. No, I said. They teach you how to survive a mission. He snorted. Surviving isn't the same as not being swallowed. You can come home and still be waiting at the edge of your life, staff. We found a shallow cairn, 3 flat stones, one on top of the other, tucked under a thorn bush where we used to stash extra rations. Someone had carved initials into the top stone with a pocket knife, K.R., then another set, smaller, P.V., then my initials, half faded. The carving looked newer than the rust on our helmets. Kale's name. Vargas's. Mine. We sat. The sandstone was warm from the sun. The wind tried to be a presence and only managed to be a whisper. Parker reached out and touched the letters on the stone. His fingers trembled, just a little. You hear them last night? He asked. Which ones? I said. All of them, he said. Not just us. A chorus. Old men, young voices, women in languages you don't know, call signs you don't remember. They were lining up, staff. Said we were going to form something. Said we were going to hold a perimeter and never let the quiet through again. You heard that too. I said, because now I needed confirmation. Needed to know the canyon hadn't just birthed me some personal hell. He nodded. Been hearing it. Since the storm. Feels like the world's trying to put a guard at the edge of itself. I thought about that. The canyon had always been a machine for attention. It demanded to be noticed. It fed on memory as a fever feeds on sleep. The more we looked, the stronger it grew. The more we turned our backs, the stranger the things that wrapped themselves around our ankles. We stayed until the light bled out of the sky. Around us, the land whispered and the radios in the distance kept prosaic time. At some point, in the thinning dark, I felt the comms in my pack warm under my hand and then, not like before, a voice not from my squad but older, creased like the pages of a manual that had been read in the dark 100 times. Staff, the voice said. Not distant. Right beside my ear, like someone breathing at the side of my head. We need you to hold the south line. The gap opened again. I wanted to argue. My body wanted to fold and sleep. I wanted to be small and ordinary. But I moved because my legs still remembered the motions. We walked the ridge. We set up an impromptu line of sight, using rocks and dead branches and the memory of how gun sights had fallen before. Sometimes I watched my hands and marveled that they were mine, that they could build a temporary barricade while my mind stitched together flashbacks of the blast that took half my face and then left me to wake up and build again. As the night rooted deep, the voices started their policing. Not like radio commands. Not like orders. More like cadences. A metronome for the living. They'd call out distances, mark vectors, correct my aim. 3 meters. Step left. Not the one with the scratch. The other. Your heartbeat's too loud. Slow it down. I breathed as instructed. My pulse steadied. The world narrowed to the rhythm they provided. The help felt like a wire looped under skin, a sympathetic vibration carrying me through the dark. At 0200, we got a hit. Small arms. The sound flared and then threaded into CAD-like procedure. Contact, bearing 26, suppressive. Bravo stack, move. I thought about that. The canyon had always been a machine for attention. It demanded to be noticed. It fed on memory as a fever feeds on sleep. The more we looked, the stronger it grew. The more we turned our backs, the stranger the things that wrapped themselves around our ankles. We stayed until the light bled out of the sky. Around us, the land whispered and the radios in the distance kept prosaic time. At some point, in the thinning dark, I felt the comms in my pack warm under my hand, and then, not like before, a voice not from my squad but older, creased like the pages of a manual that had been read in the dark 100 times. "Staff," the voice said. Not distant. Right beside my ear, like someone breathing at the side of my head. "We need you to hold the south line." The gap opened again. I wanted to argue. My body wanted to fold and sleep. I wanted to be small and ordinary. But I moved because my legs still remembered the motions. We walked the ridge. We set up an impromptu line of sight, using rocks and dead branches and the memory of how gun sights had fallen before. Sometimes I watched my hands and marveled that they were mine, that they could build a temporary barricade while my mind stitched together flashbacks of the blast that took half my face and then left me to wake up and build again. As the night rooted deep, the voices started their policing. Not like radio commands. Not like orders. More like cadences. A metronome for the living. They'd call out distances, mark vectors, correct my aim. 3 meters. Step left. Not the one with the scratch. The other. Your heartbeat's too loud. Slow it down. I breathed as instructed. My pulse steadied. The world narrowed to the rhythm they provided. The help felt like a wire looped under skin, a sympathetic vibration carrying me through the dark. At 0200, we got a hit. Small arms. The sound flared and then threaded into CAD-like procedure. Contact, bearing 26, suppressive. Bravo stack, move. Noters, the enemy's name in the heat of the moment faded to a shape. The bullet stung the earth nearby. A chunk of dust bloomed and the sound of metal hitting stone echoed with a clean bell note, like a tuning fork. Parker moved like a man who knew the script by heart. He adjusted, muscled, took a position, called an instant correction in the cadence we'd all learned in another life. Thompson, or his echo, answered from somewhere I couldn't place, left flank, and then the world narrowed to the sound of effort and the machine of strategy. It was merciless and efficient and beautiful in the way violence made things clear, cut through the fog, choose function over thought, do the one thing that mattered. We pushed back. We stabilized the line. After, the dust settled. The stars were oddly bright. The comms hummed back to the ordinary channels that belonged to living units somewhere else. But under that, like a second layer of lacquer over the world, there was the low background murmur of our squad. Their voices were not hollow now. They had warmth, memory, private jokes I hadn't heard in years, the ones that live under skin and pop out at stupid hours. "You okay?" Parker asked, leaning his head back against the cracked stone. "Yeah," I lied. The lie came out soft as flint. Easier to handle than rust. Parker laughed, then turned serious. "Listen. I don't like this. Don't think I do. But if they're still sounding the alarms, maybe they don't want to be lost. Maybe that's the point. Maybe this is how they keep each other from going hollow. If they want to be found," I said, "then why don't they just stop? Why tether themselves to this? Why keep the loop?" He shrugged. "Maybe that's how they make sense of being gone. One more call out, one more push, one more buddy to cover you while you crawl on your face to the medevac. The canyon doesn't give you a say once it grabs you. It only offers tasks. People are good at doing tasks. "You sound like a goddamn chaplain," I told him. He grinned. "I sound like someone who's bored waiting for the end." The next day I tried to get out of it. Tried to pretend I didn't hear the whispers. Went to the lieutenant with a request for transfer, red tape, something bureaucratic and human that would put distance between me and these voices. He read the form, looked at me as if I'd asked him to apologize on behalf of the government, and stamped it without comment. The form went through, and I expected the breath of relief to follow. Instead, a smaller, sharper feeling filled me, like I'd handed the canyon a key. At night, the radio acted up and a new voice joined the chorus, a fresh tone, not my squad, but young and crisp. A new recruit, maybe, never been to a combat zone, or someone who hadn't been yet but would become a name one day. The voice asked a procedural question and my breath snagged. How many rounds do we keep? Where do we push if the slope caves? Someone, my hand, my tongue, my joined memory, answered in the old way. They moved as if the answer was always the same. And I realized then that memory wasn't only retrieving the dead, it was recruiting the living. It was teaching them to answer before they'd ever been asked, to respond to a drill they hadn't drilled for yet. The canyon was seeding itself outward. I started to hear names I didn't know. Nonsense at first, syllables that might be Farsi, might be Pashto, might be something else, then the real bones of them, Kaito, Emre, Layla. Names that stuck to the back of my teeth when I tried to spit them out. They were not our men. But they sounded like the same pattern, the same cadence. They were the canyon's new bookmarks. One night, I found myself sitting alone with my headset on, listening to all the channels converging into one slow wave. Parker's and Thompson's and Vargas's voices braided with strange accents until there was a chorus, then a hush, then a single phrase that pulled through like a needle in fabric, "Hold the line." A new voice answered. Soft. Young. Terrified. How long? Until they come, the chorus said. Until we stop. Until someone else remembers us. I let the words sink in until they became a bruise. Until the room inside my ribs felt packed with the hugeness of it. We were being held not by orders from a chain of command but by an insistence, remember, respond, repeat. The canyon had turned mourning into a mission. When the medevac finally lifted me out months after the canyon, patched and filthy and mostly human, the doctors said I was lucky. The chaplain said I had a guardian angel. My wife wrote letters that said, "Come home to the kids. They sleep under the blanket I washed this morning." And all of it was true and false in equal measure. The kids slept under a blanket washed the night before I woke up in a ditch. The chaplain prayed and meant it. The medevac pilots made a map that showed routes and air corridors like veins. But what none of them understood was that I had left a part of me behind, not as a casualty, not as an error, but as a kind of bookmark for the canyon. Something vital and stubborn and male that refused to fold away. I could walk out of the damn place with my bones intact and still not be free, because the canyon had a ledger and it had my name and it had my voice and it kept replaying them in places I never wanted them to be. Now, when the voices come, I don't only listen. I collect. I write. I leave small offerings. A pack of gum. A photograph. A note. A prayer. I use my life to anchor theirs. And in doing so, I tie myself to the canyon tighter. A paradox, the more I preserve them, the more they insist on me staying. The more I write, the louder they call. But there's another truth, harder to swallow. Sometimes, when the static clears and the voices are crisp and lining up in cadence, I want to answer their final question with a yes. I want to walk into the canyon and lay down and be still because the work of remembering is heavy. It swallows the edges off days. It erodes sleep and leaves you with a cleanliness that is not rest. The idea of never fighting again, of letting someone else hold the line, of handing the world over to men who carry no calendars, it sounds restful in a way that scares me. So I keep writing. I keep calling names. I keep leaving scraps so the canyon will know I remembered it properly. Maybe that's what redeems me. Maybe not. But it's what I do. Tonight, there was a new sound, not on the comms, but in my mind as I lay awake, a rhythm like a heartbeat multiplied. It wasn't just Bravo 6 now. Not even close. It was a chorus building towards something. A frequency humming under the skin of the country. Parker turned to me in the dark and said, "They're bringing their boys home." I didn't know who they were. But I knew what that sounded like, an ending, maybe. Or a beginning. Or another loop too big to resist. I thought then of the kids at home, the one who asked me if I'd ever stop remembering and the one who wanted to know why I sometimes kissed the air like it was someone else's cheek. I thought of my wife, who slept with my old t-shirt like a talisman, and of the chaplain who had tried to make me promise to stop going back to the canyon. I thought of all the small, human things that keep time honest. And I realized, if the canyon is building an army of memory, if the echoes are learning and recruiting and weaving names into their howl, then politics, strategy, and medals mean less than the act of telling. We are not heroes or villains here. We are witnesses. I look at the logbook now, the pages thick with ink and poor handwriting and lines that look like prayers. I think of the names I've added recently, not all my friends, not all my dead, some strangers who needed a hand. Tomorrow, I will go back out. I will walk the ridge. I will listen. I will take a tape recorder and leave it running even when I sleep. I will leave a note under a rock for the next man who hears the canyon coughing his name. Because that's what we do. We hold our line. We write our names. We answer the call. Because when the loop comes for you, and it will, whether you know it yet or not, you'll want someone to have already said your name out loud. There's a sound I've started to dread more than gunfire, more than mortars, more than the hollow crack of a rifle shot bouncing off canyon walls. It's the sound of silence breaking. Not silence itself. That I can handle. Silence is the blanket I wrap around me when the world spins too fast. But the moment it fractures. When the air hums. When the static sharpens. When the canyon clears its throat and starts to speak. That's when I know another night is about to be written into me. Last night it started with breathing. Not mine. Not Parker's. Not anyone alive. Just a slow, steady inhale. Hold. Exhale. Again. And again. And again. It came from the radio headset lying cold on the desk. Battery out. Circuit fried. I hadn't touched it in days. But there it was, breathing. I waited, pen clenched in my fist like a weapon. And then, softly. Staff. Time to move. My stomach clenched. Because that wasn't Parker. Wasn't Vargas. Wasn't Kale. It was me. My own voice. I didn't argue. Didn't ask how or why or what it wanted. I just put on my boots and stepped into the night. The desert was cool, stars bright and sharp like glass shards stuck in black cloth. The compound was asleep, generators humming, guards yawning, dogs curled in shadows. But I walked out past the wire, past the road, past the point where my body should have told me to stop. The voice guided me. Not commands. Not orders. Just quiet affirmations. Little further. Left here. Almost. And then I saw it. A light. Small. Flickering. Like a lantern half buried in the ground. I knelt. It wasn't a lantern. It was a helmet. My old helmet. The one blown off me in the canyon, never recovered. Inside it. A folded scrap of paper. I opened it. 3 words, written in my own handwriting. You stayed once. My chest tightened. I wanted to throw the helmet, burn the paper, run back to the safety of walls and watchtowers. But then the air shifted. Not wind. Not sand. Voices. Dozens. Hundreds. Layered, overlapping, not in English, not in any one language. But all of them at once. They weren't whispering anymore. They were chanting. Names. Dates. Coordinates. Every marker ever left. Every soldier ever remembered. Every scrap of metal, cloth, photograph, coin. They were cataloging it all, a litany of proof, a roll call of memory. And I realized. The canyon isn't just holding us. It's building something. A ledger. A library. An army of names that refuses to vanish. And my voice. My dead squad. My echoes. We're just the beginning. When I came back to myself, the helmet was gone. The paper too. Just dirt under my knees and a taste of iron on my tongue. But I could still hear the chanting. Low. Faint. Underneath everything. Like the world itself was repeating after them. Like reality was learning the words. And I thought. What happens when the canyon finishes? When the ledger is full? When every name is remembered? Will the war finally end? Or will it start again? Bigger, louder, endless. Because silence itself will have nowhere left to hide. I kept walking until my knees stopped shaking. The night it all cracked open didn't begin with voices. It began with silence that wasn't mine. The kind of silence that feels staged, like someone dimmed the world for effect. No bugs. No dogs barking in the distance. No generators grinding. Not even the soft metallic sigh of trucks cooling in the dark. Just stillness, wide and waiting, as if every sound had been pulled into a throat that hadn't decided whether to breathe or scream. That was when the ledger started humming. Not literally. Not vibration through wood. But through me. Like every name I'd written in it was tugging at the marrow of my bones, asking for attention. I pulled it out from under the socks. The cover was warm. The oilskin had sweated. When I opened it, the pages lit faintly in the dark, as if ink had turned to ember. And there, between the names I had written and the ones written before me, were new entries. Fresh. Precise. In a hand I didn't recognize. And at the bottom of the newest page was my daughter's name. Not her nickname. Not the version my wife uses. Her real name, spelled the way only I ever spelled it when I signed cards just for her. And beside it, a date. Tomorrow. I slammed the book shut so hard the desk rattled. My throat locked. For a second I thought maybe it was just the canyon playing a trick, pulling a nightmare out of my head and writing it down to see if I'd flinch. But when I opened it again, it was still there. Her name. That date. And below it, one more line. You stayed once. You'll stay again. I don't remember leaving the compound. One moment I was staring at the ledger. The next I was outside the wire, boots sinking into dust, headset clamped tight even though I hadn't put it on. The voices were already there. Parker. Vargas. Kale. All of them. Staff, don't panic. We can change this. That's why we're still here. I wanted to scream, to demand how, to demand what any of this had to do with my daughter, with tomorrow, with the canyon. But my mouth wouldn't work. I just kept walking. And the night opened up like a door. The wash was alive. Markers I had left, coins, mirrors, strips of cloth, were glowing faintly. Not bright. Not unnatural. Just enough to catch my eye, to say, you put me here, remember? And as I moved deeper, each marker hummed. Voices layered behind them, voices of the names I had written. A choir of the remembered. They weren't whispers anymore. They weren't faint. They were loud. Commanding. Demanding. And together they were saying one thing, over and over, in every language, every cadence. Finish the ledger. I reached the riverbed. The table was there again. Ledger waiting, pages open. But this time it wasn't alone. Men ringed the table. Some in uniform. Some in rags. Some in armor older than any war I'd studied. Faces from every century of violence. They stood silent. And behind them, more. A wall of soldiers stretching into the canyon shadows. Not ghosts. Not illusions. Solid enough to block out the stars. All of them waiting for me. Parker stepped forward. Helmet in one hand, rifle in the other. He looked older. Not dead older. Just worn, like time had been chewing on him even in the loop. He set the rifle down on the table. "You know what this is, staff," he said. I shook my head. But my hands were already on the ledger. "It's the last entry," Parker said. "The anchor. The one that decides if we keep fighting forever." He tapped the page where my daughter's name was written. "Or if we finally end it." The air split. Not with sound. With presence. The chorus roared, every name I'd ever written screaming at once, a wave of voices so loud my teeth ached. I bent over the ledger. The pen was in my hand. One line left to write. One choice. Either cross out her name, erase her from the ledger, make the canyon forget her. Or write mine beneath it, and take her place. I stared at the page until my vision blurred. Her name glowed like a wound that hadn't closed, the ink pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The pen was heavy. Not metal heavy. Not wood heavy. Choice heavy. Every gram of it felt like it contained the weight of every soldier standing in the shadows behind Parker. Erase her. Write mine. Erase her. Write mine. The canyon didn't rush me. That was the cruelest part. It just waited, patient, knowing that time itself was another weapon in its hand. Parker leaned closer, his voice steady, unshaken, like he'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "You know the rule, staff. A name erased is a life forgotten. A name—" "You broke the loop," he said quietly. "Don't know what that means yet. But it's done." I reached for him. My hand passed through smoke. He smiled, small, tired, grateful. And then he was gone. The ledger lay closed on the table. When I lifted it, the cover was cold. No hum. No warmth. No names glowing like embers inside. Just a book. Just ink and paper. Just silence. I tucked it under my arm and walked back through the wash alone. The markers I'd left were still there, coins, mirrors, cloth strips. But they were only objects now. Memory without a mouth. Tokens without teeth. By the time I reached the compound, the sun was rising. Ordinary light. Ordinary shadows. A generator coughing awake. A dog barking at nothing but the morning. I opened the ledger one last time. Every page was blank. The names. All of them. Gone. Even mine. Especially mine. I dropped the book on my bunk. It made no sound when it landed. For the first time in years, I slept. And in the dream, there was no canyon. No static. No ledger. No squad. Only her laugh. Bright, endless, untouchable. Filling the air until it was more real than silence. When I woke, it was afternoon. The kind of light that feels lazy, warm, and uninterested in history. I blinked into it, half expecting to hear Vargas crack a joke about me finally sleeping like a human. Half expecting Parker to toss a bottle cap at my head and call it reveille. But the room was empty. Just the hum of the fan. The smell of dust and oil. The ledger lying on the desk, blank as paper from a factory. I touched it once, half dreading it might flare alive again. It didn't. Just cold leather. I thought I should feel relief. Instead, I felt hollow. Like the silence had swallowed not just the voices, but the part of me that had been alive only when they spoke. That evening, I walked out to the perimeter alone. The desert stretched wide, ordinary, nothing glowing, no static. But I found myself scanning anyway. Looking for seams in the dirt. Listening for breaths in the silence. Waiting for callouts that never came. And that's when I understood the canyon's final cruelty. It hadn't just ended the loop. It had left me behind with nothing but memory. Memory with no reply. Memory with no chorus. Memory that only went one way. Back in the barracks, I opened my logbook. Every page was still there, names, dates, details, scribbles from nights I barely remembered writing. The ink hadn't vanished like the ledgers. These were still mine. And when I whispered one of the names aloud, nothing answered. But the room felt different. Not fuller. Not emptier. Just aware. Like maybe that was the point all along. Not to keep the voices. Not to feed the canyon. But to keep the names moving through lips that could still speak. Later, I burned the ledger. No ceremony. No prayer. Just tossed it in an oil drum behind the motor pool, lit it with a match, and watched the smoke coil into the night. The pages curled, cracked, turned to ash. The blankness turned black. When the last scrap crumbled, I swear I heard something. Not voices. Not static. Just a sigh, long and tired, drifting into the dark. And then, nothing. I don't know if the canyon is finished. I don't know if Parker or Vargas or Kale are truly gone, or if they're waiting somewhere I can't hear anymore. I don't know if the markers I left will still mean anything to the next man who finds them. All I know is this. When I close my eyes now, I don't hear chanting. I don't hear orders. I don't hear callouts. I hear her laugh. And for the first time in years. That's enough. The war doesn't end when the guns go quiet. It ends when the names don't vanish. When someone remembers. When silence is filled, not by static, not by echoes. But by something human. So I'll keep the logbook. I'll keep writing. I'll keep whispering the names, even if no one answers. Because maybe that's the real fight. Not to win. Not to survive. But to remember. And maybe. Just maybe. That's how you finally leave the canyon. Not by staying. Not by trading. Not by finishing the ledger. But by refusing to let silence have the last word. The days blurred after that. I still went on patrols. Still ate the bad chow, still laughed at jokes that weren't funny just to keep the air alive, still wrote reports no one read. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Because once you've heard the dead guide your steps, once you've stood in front of a ledger that writes tomorrow before it arrives, once you've broken the loop. Ordinary life feels like walking through water. Each movement slow. Each word heavy. Each silence suspicious. One night, weeks later, I woke to rain. Not a storm. Just soft drops tapping the roof, a sound almost foreign in a land where dust usually ruled. And in that gentle rhythm, I swore I heard something. Not voices. Not orders. Just a cadence. Like boots marching. Not around me. Not toward me. But away. Fading. Growing softer. Disappearing into the distance. I sat up, heart pounding, waiting for it to loop back, to circle, to return. It didn't. For the first time, the footsteps didn't come back. They were truly gone. The relief should have been overwhelming. Instead, I cried. Quietly. into my hands. Not because I wanted them to stay, but because letting go means you finally understand what's been holding you. The logbook still sits by my bunk. I write in it every night. Not just names anymore. Memories. Details. Fragments of laughter. Descriptions of skies and dust storms and the way coffee tastes when you haven't slept in 3 days. Because if silence is a predator, then memory is the fence you build against it. And even if no one ever reads my pages, at least the words exist. At least they'll outlast me. Sometimes, when I whisper the names now, I still pause. Waiting for Vargas to answer. For Parker to tease. For Kale to laugh. They don't. But the room feels less empty when I do. Maybe that's all memory is meant to do. Not to resurrect. Not to trap. But to keep emptiness from swallowing everything. The canyon hasn't called me back since. But if it ever does. If the silence sharpens. If the static hums again. I know what I'll bring. Not the ledger. Not weapons. Not fear. Just the logbook. And a pen. Because as long as I can write. As long as I can say the names. The loop is broken. And silence. No matter how wide. No matter how deep. Won't win. Not while memory still has a voice. I mailed the first copy of the logbook home. Wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine, slid into the outgoing post like it was nothing more than a package of rations. Inside, on the first page, I wrote a note for her. These are names, sweetheart. Not all of them are mine to tell, but they asked me to keep them alive. Someday, when you read this, you'll understand that remembering is another kind of bravery. I don't know if she'll ever open it. I don't know if she'll ever understand. But the act of sending it, of putting memory in motion, out into the world beyond the canyon, felt like laying down a burden without abandoning it. At night now, the silence isn't hostile. It just is. A backdrop. A canvas. Not something pressing against me, not something sharpening into a demand. I walk the perimeter and it's only my boots I hear. Only the clink of gear. Only the slow hum of a living world carrying on. And that's enough. But every now and then, I see a marker. Not mine. Not one I remember leaving. A coin under a rock. A strip of cloth tied to wire. A mirror leaning against a stone. And I know someone else has picked up the habit. The canyon may be silent. The ledger may be ash. But the practice lives on. And maybe that's the point. Not to trap the dead in endless loops. Not to bind tomorrow before it comes. But to teach the living how to carry memory forward without breaking under it. Last week, a young private stopped me outside the chow hall. He looked nervous, eyes darting, hands fidgeting like he was about to confess a crime. I found something, staff, he whispered. Under a rock out by the canal. A page. With names. I added mine. Is that okay? I wanted to tell him no. To tell him he'd only be inviting the canyon back. But the way he said it, hesitant, hopeful, like he'd just joined a secret club of people who understood how heavy silence could be. I couldn't. I just nodded. Good, I said. Keep writing. That night, when I lay down, I didn't hear voices. But I dreamed. In the dream, my squad was sitting at the table again. Not ghosts. Not echoes. Just men. Cards spread, cigarettes burning low, laughter filling the air. They didn't look at me. Didn't call me over. Didn't ask me to stay. They just played their hand, ordinary and alive. And I woke with a smile I hadn't worn in years. So maybe that's how the war ends. Not with victory. Not with peace treaties. Not even with silence. But with memory, passed hand to hand, page to page, until it no longer needs to shout to be heard. And when the last name is spoken, not by the canyon, not by static, but by someone alive, maybe that's when the dead finally rest. And the living, at last, can sleep. Morning came with the usual dust and diesel, but it felt different. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just steady, like the ground had finally stopped shifting under my boots. I brewed coffee, the cheap bitter kind that tastes more like smoke than beans, and for once it didn't feel like fuel. It felt like a ritual. Something done not to survive, but to mark a day. I sat on the step outside the barracks, steaming cup in hand, logbook balanced on my knee. The pages smelled of ink and sweat and desert air. I flipped to the first entry I'd ever written. The handwriting was jagged, restless, barely legible. I ran a finger over the lines and realized I didn't need to hear the voices anymore. The memory was enough. The act of keeping it alive was enough. A convoy rolled out at noon. Engines roared, men shouted, dust rose in plumes. I watched them go, faces half covered, eyes narrowed against the glare. Young. Too young, some of them. And I thought, maybe one day, when they're older, when the silence starts pressing against them, someone will hand them a page. A coin. A marker. A logbook. And they'll understand without anyone having to explain. That's how memory survives. Not in ledgers that bind the dead, but in small tokens passed forward, in names whispered when no one else is listening. At dusk, I walked out past the wire one last time. No voices. No static. No canyon pulling at my skin. Just wind. Just sand. Just the earth breathing in its own rhythm. I knelt at a flat stone and slid a fresh page beneath it. On the page I wrote only one line. We were here. And we remembered. Then I pressed the stone down, stood, and walked back. That night I slept without dreams. No canyon. No ledger. No squad calling from the dark. Just sleep. The kind you don't wake from with your heart pounding. The kind that feels like an answer. And when I woke at dawn, the silence was still there. But it was no longer a threat. It was a gift. A space wide enough to hold memory. A space quiet enough to let it breathe. And for the first time, I knew. The war was over. Not for everyone. Not everywhere. But for me. And that was enough. I didn't mark the day on a calendar. Didn't circle it in red. Didn't file a report. But I knew. That morning when I laced my boots, when I shouldered my gear, when I stepped out into the desert air. I wasn't carrying the canyon anymore. It was still there, sure. It would always be there, carved into the dirt and bone of memory. But it wasn't inside me. It wasn't humming in my blood. It wasn't writing in my sleep. It wasn't whispering through static. It was just a place I had once walked. The men didn't notice. Why would they? They joked, they smoked, they checked their rifles, they argued about music. Life kept rolling like a convoy down an endless road. But for me, there was no weight pressing behind the silence. No hidden ledger waiting to be filled. No fear that the next step would echo with ghosts. Just the world, imperfect and heavy and alive. That night, I opened the logbook one last time. Not to write. Not to add. Not to whisper names into the dark. But to close it. I ran a hand over the cover, scarred and stained from months of carrying. Then I slid it into my pack, not hidden, not sacred, just mine. A book like any other, full of pages only I could have written. I lay down after midnight, listening. The silence was still there. But it didn't bite. It held me. Soft, steady, ordinary. And as I drifted off, I realized something I hadn't dared believe until then. The war doesn't take everything. It leaves you what you choose to keep. And I had chosen to remember, to write, to carry the names forward. And then, finally, to rest. That was the end. Not loud. Not violent. Not final in any cinematic way. Just quiet enough to sleep. And strong enough to last. The sun rose the next morning like it always does, slow, patient, as if nothing in the world had shifted. And maybe nothing had. Not for anyone else. But for me, it was different. I brewed coffee. Sat on the same step I'd sat on 100 times before. Watched the dust drift in lazy spirals across the yard. For once, it wasn't a reminder of the canyon. It wasn't the shape of ghosts in the air. It was just dust. Just morning. Just a day. I thought about the logbook in my pack. I thought about the pages already filled. I thought about the empty ones still waiting. Not for the dead. Not for the canyon. But for whatever comes next. Stories my daughter might tell me when I get home. Dreams I might finally remember without fear. Moments worth holding that aren't bound to war. Pages for life, not loss. For the first time in a long time, I felt steady enough to imagine a future. Not one written in the ledger. Not one carved in stone. Not one whispered in static. A future made by choice. By memory. By breath. The war will always live somewhere inside me. That's a truth no one escapes. But it doesn't own me anymore. It doesn't write my pages. It doesn't choose my silences. That's mine now. And with that thought, I stood, stretched, and walked into the day. Not as a soldier bound to the canyon. But as a man finally free enough to remember without being trapped. The war was over. And for the first time, so was I. The camp stirred awake around me, boots scuffing gravel, engines coughing alive, laughter breaking in short bursts. Ordinary sounds. The kind I used to scan for hidden meaning, for patterns, for whispers stitched into the noise. Now they were just life. I breathed them in like medicine. Later, I walked the edge of the wire one more time. Not searching. Not waiting. Just walking. The ground was familiar underfoot, scarred with old tire tracks and wind-cut lines, but it no longer hummed. The air was thin, hot, sharp with dust, and only dust. I paused at a stone I'd once used as a marker. Bent down, slid my palm across it, half expecting to feel the faint tremor of names pressing back. Nothing. Just stone. Just earth. And somehow, that felt like a blessing. On the way back, I realized I wasn't listening for Parker anymore. Or Vargas. Or Cale. Their absence hurt, yes, but not like before. This time, it was the kind of ache you carry with pride, like a scar you don't hide, because it means you healed. That night, I closed my eyes and slept without the logbook under my hand. For once, I didn't need the weight of it to anchor me. And in the dream that came, there was no canyon, no static, no ledger, no table heavy with impossible names. Only a kitchen light back home. Only the smell of coffee brewing. Only her laugh, rolling through the room like sunlight. When I woke, I wasn't disappointed it was a dream. I was grateful. Because it meant I could still dream of something else. And that, more than anything, told me the truth I'd been too afraid to believe. I wasn't trapped anymore. The canyon no longer owned me. Memory did. And memory, spoken, written, shared, wasn't a prison. It was freedom. I stayed another week, maybe two. Hard to tell, time blurred without the voices counting it off in the static. Every day felt like a rehearsal for a life I hadn't lived in years. Waking. Eating. Patrolling. Writing when I wanted, not when I had to. The silence stopped being something I tested, stopped being something I braced against. It became a companion again, soft, ordinary, almost kind. One evening, I pulled the logbook from my pack and set it on the desk. The pages were half full, scarred with ink that leaned and staggered and sometimes bled through. I thought about tearing out the old names, starting fresh. But I didn't. Because those names weren't traps anymore. They were proof. Proof that they'd been here. Proof that I'd carried them. Proof that remembering could be heavy without being endless. When orders finally came for me to rotate out, I didn't argue. Didn't stall. Didn't dread. I packed my things, gear, socks, the logbook. No ledger. No markers. No secrets to hide under stones. Just a book. Just a memory. Just me. The convoy carried me away at dawn. I watched the horizon shift, the dust trail stretching out behind us like a tether. For a moment, I thought I'd hear Parker's voice telling me to keep my head down, to check the mirrors, to watch the ridgeline. But there was nothing. Only the rumble of engines. Only the chatter of men who hadn't yet learned what silence could do. And I realized that was how it should be. I didn't look back when the canyon disappeared behind the hills. Some places aren't meant to be stared at once you've left. Some places are meant to stay in memory. Quiet, dangerous, unfinished. And the canyon was one of them. I leaned my head against the glass, closed my eyes, and let the silence ride with me. Not haunting. Not hungry. Just there. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of where it might take me. When the plane lifted, I thought the silence would follow me, curl into the fuselage, settle in beside me like it always had. But as the desert shrank below, I realized it wasn't chasing anymore. The canyon stayed where it belonged, behind me. Not forgotten. Not erased. Just, left. Months later, I was home. The first morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor and for a second I froze, waiting for static. It didn't come. Instead, I heard her laugh, bright, human, unbroken. I held on to that sound like it was the last marker I'd ever need. Sometimes, late at night, I open the logbook. The pages smell faintly of dust and ink, the weight of every name still pressed into them. But I don't hear voices anymore. No whispers. No call-outs. No chanting. Just memory. And that's enough. The war didn't end with the ledger. It didn't end with the canyon. It ended the moment I chose to keep the names without carrying the silence. And now, when I close my eyes, I finally sleep. No static. No canyon. Only life. Only tomorrow. Only peace. And in that peace, I finally understood. The canyon was never about death. Never about war. Never about ghosts. It was about memory. About what we carry. And what we choose to set down. I carried it long enough. Now it's time to carry something else. Her laughter. The warmth of home. The small, ordinary moments that make life worth remembering. The war will live in me forever, yes. But it no longer owns me. And as I walk forward, into silence that feels like a friend instead of a threat, I know this is the true ending. Not the canyon. Not the ledger. Not the loop. Just me. Alive. Awake. And free.